Who are the biggest winners and losers coming out of the NFL Combine? We'll tell you on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Welcome back. I'm your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we're taking a look at the biggest winners and losers from the NFL Combine. And Kate, on Friday's show, we did a whole show on Quinshon Judkins, one of my favorite players in the class. And we're starting Monday's show off talking about Quinshon Judkins. Why is he one of the biggest winners from the Combine?
Now, just to go back, summarize, if you haven't checked out our full player profile on Quinshon Judkins, go do that again. Last week's Friday show, we've been breaking down all of the prospects that you need to know heading into your rookie drafts one by one. We're going to keep doing it all off season. So again, keep checking back for that. But Quinshon Judkins, just to summarize this running back out of OSU, Quinshon Judkins is kind of a jack of all trades, almost master of none type of deal. And we talked about that sort of maybe affecting some of the flashiness that Quinshon Judkins has in terms of maybe his perceived dynasty value, because, you know, the tape's really great. He's a fun running back to watch. The production, pretty solid overall, but like he didn't have one single calling card that really was going to drive up his draft stock. He wasn't elite in anything, but what we saw here in this combine is he tested out as a much better athlete than I think anybody was anticipating. Let's talk about it.
He's just a good player, Kate.
He's a good player.
And I don't want to say I had concerns about his speed, because I didn't, but I didn't think he was like this home run hitting running back with elite speed or elite measurables. And we go to the combine and he posts really, really good numbers. 4.48 40-yard dash, 1.51 10-yard split. I believe that was the second best 10-yard split of all the running backs at the combine. I'll double check. Yeah, tied for the second best 10-yard split, which is unbelievable. I care more about the 10-yard split than I do the 40-yard dash, because most of your runs are going to be happening between 0 and 10 yards. How quick can you explode out of your stance? And then it's the jump skate, 38.5-inch vertical, 11-foot broad jump. We expected TreVeyon Henderson, the other Ohio State running back, to test really well, and he did. But for Judkins to have the better jumps just shows you his explosiveness and lower body strength. I think for me, coming out of the combine, like I always thought Judkins was kind of in that the last running back in that tier 2 with Hampton, Caleb Johnson, TreVeyon Henderson. I still have that thought leaving Indianapolis, but now my thing is, how high could he be drafted? Like, I thought there was a chance that maybe he goes at the end of round 2, early round 3. And now I wonder if he even gets outside the top 50 picks.
And I think that's a very fair question. Now, again, for a player that I don't think like popped off the page in terms of dominance, he played, you know, at OSU with a ton of talent around him, both at wide receiver and playing alongside TreVeyon Henderson, which he tied his 92 athleticism score per NFL Next Gen Stats IQ was tied with TreVeyon Henderson, who widely regarded as the far superior athlete here. So I think when you
Henderson has more long speed, but I think everything else Judkins has.
But that broad jump, vert 90th percentile for the running back position. That 11-foot broad jump ranks in the 98th percentile for the running back position. That's crazy. And for a guy that, again, you don't necessarily care about, you know, you want him to have home run hitting speed, but makes up for maybe a lack of that with some really nice footwork that I think makes him more elusive down the stretch. He just kind of crushed it. And I think he answered a lot of questions about like his athleticism, because when you're compared to that home run hitting back like Henderson in the same backfield, especially like that, that can make you a little, look a little slower when you don't have that same top end speed, but he's
All I
got the
want to say,
production. You love it.
he just checks every box. 3
Mhm.
years of production. He was productive at Ole Miss and at Ohio State. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can handle a big workload. The size is really good. The speed is good. I think he runs incredibly hard. He's somebody like if my favorite team, the Dallas Cowboys, needed a running back, Kate, like this is the guy that I want in round 2 because I just think he is a really good blend of speed, power, and explosiveness. And maybe he wasn't somebody that was in round 2 conversations going into the combine. I think he is now.
I think that's absolutely the case. Now let's talk about a couple of other winners here because there were some players that really showed out. I think Travion Henderson checked a lot of boxes. Again, a
Mhm.
player that we've already talked about here on this show. Go back, check that profile. But, again, just kind of checked the boxes. Like, yes, he tested as well as he played, but you don't want to double count those marks.
No.
Let's talk about wide receiver Matthew Golden out of Texas, who kind of shocked, I think, a lot of people. Ran a 4.29 40-yard dash. I think was expected to run close to like the mid fours, and was one of the fastest players here at the combine. And when you contrast that with the fact that like your teammate here, Mr. Isaiah Bond,
Yep, yep.
swore he was about to break a combine record, that he suddenly starts to look pretty good. But I think the testing is going to help him tremendously in the pre-draft process. Doesn't necessarily look like the same kind of burner on the field, but still, when we're talking about combine performances, that's going to help your draft stock end of day.
I remember when Prize Picks, shout out to Prize Picks, to release their more than less than totals, and it was more than 4.30 for Matthew Golden. I'm like, oh, take the more than that's like it's such a lock. Like I think he's going to run in like the mid 4.4s. Nope, 4.29. I couldn't have been more wrong on that. Um, I didn't see that type of player on tape, and again, I'm gonna have to go back and watch the tape to see like if I missed it. But assuming, let's say you did, I do wonder if we could start getting some like Chris Olave types, like the
Ooh,
under 6 foot, 190 pounds, but it's got this elite speed that can create separation downfield. He's somebody that I think, yeah, we have to start putting a lot of attention in. I was doing a mock draft today for the 33rd team, a 3-round dynasty mock. And I don't know how you put Matthew Golden outside of round 1 because now we've got NFL insiders telling us that Golden could be the first receiver drafted, that he's a lock to go inside the top 20. To me, that feels a little rich, but there's no denying he's a huge winner coming out of the combine.
for sure. Yeah. And again, I'm in agreement. That feels a little bit reactionary for me, but hey, I think this is, one of those moments where we kind of let's follow the cookie crumbs, see where they lead us. Any other winners you want to talk about here before we get into some of the people that didn't maybe come out looking quite as favorably as we expected?
Yeah, just really quick. I thought Omarion Hampton had a really good day. He had a 1.54 10-yard split. The 40 was very good. I've always been of the belief that he's RB2 in this class. He ran a 4.46 at 221 pounds. The jumps were all fantastic. I just think he's widened the gap a little bit between Travion Henderson, Judkins, and Caleb Johnson, where I think he should be the second running back off our boards in our rookie drafts. And now the only question is like, should he be the number 2 overall player drafted, even in the super flex drafts, ahead of Cam Ward, ahead of Tet McMillan? I thought Hampton had a really strong weekend.
Yeah, I think for me, the gap is, again, I'm not saying Ashton Jeanty is not a generational prospect, but I have to say I'm kind of surprised because, coming into the pre-draft process, coming into, the early dynasty rankings, I felt like the gap was going to be so far between Jeanty and RB2. Omarion Hampton, my RB2 in this class. And
Can I
I
ask you
feel like
something,
the
Kate?
gap's not as wide as I would have guessed prior to this season.
I want to ask you something really quick before we move on. What gap is wider, the gap between Ashton Jeanty and Hampton or the gap between Hampton and RB3?
It's really, I think that's kind of a difficult question because I do think Hampton and, let's say Travion Henderson, who I think could make a case for RB3, as can Quinshon Judkins. Like both of those guys, I think could make a pretty reasonable case for RB3. How big is the production differential going to be at the next level? I think probably more significant than you would guess, because I think, Omarion Hampton just generally such a safe prospect in my brain. The production paired with how well he tested, like he just seems like he's got such a safe floor in comparison to maybe some of the other running backs that have some more questions. So maybe the gap it's close on both ends, but the
That's what I
gap,
was gonna say. Can we just say it's the same? It's the same gap on both sides and cop out.
yeah,
All
which
right.
is honestly crazy.
Yes.
I don't think that's a thing that I would have expected at this point in the pre-draft process.
All right, let's talk about some of the biggest losers coming out of the NFL Combine. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or you just want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in on the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love FanDuel's live betting feature because, listen, as a dad, there's just some times where I miss the opening tip-off of a game, but I still want to place a bet. FanDuel allows me to do that. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That is FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets, and make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Kate, let's talk about some losers coming out of the Combine. I would say in general, this is a very athletic running back and wide receiver class, so there really aren't a ton of losers. But there are a couple people that disappoint him.
Yeah, I want to start off by talking about Caleb Johnson, who is a running back that I think most people are pretty excited about in general. And I think, a player that I've seen in the conversation for RB2, potentially carried that Iowa offense, didn't test as well as I think maybe people thought he would, but I do want to put some asterisks by it. Okay. So Caleb Johnson, one of the biggest backs at the combine here, came in at 6'1", 224 pounds, ran a 4.57. He was expected to run in the lower 4.5. So that was not great. 4.57 ranks in the 46th percentile for the running back position. 1.62 10-yard split. That's 26th percentile for the running back position.
That's the number. He had the worst 10-yard split of any running back at the combine.
That's tough because that's when we're talking about a 10-yard split. The reason it's so important for the running back position is because you need to have that burst to break through that initial line of scrimmage, right? You need to have that short area quickness in order to make it to the next level. Nobody thought that, Caleb Johnson necessarily had like home run hitting speed. He's able to, I think, more so use his movement ability in the open field to create space than he does by being the better athlete. But again, I want to put that asterisk there. He was one of the biggest backs at the combine, right? I think fifth heaviest back at the combine. So when you put the weight in context of the 40-yard dash time, it does color it a little bit differently, I think.
Yeah, and this, just to be clear, I'm not completely out on Caleb Johnson because he ran a 4.58 with a 1.62 10-yard. It's just when you watch like Hampton, who we just talked about in the previous segment, there were a lot of discussions going into the combine week, like, hey, who is RB2 in this class? If Johnson can run in the 4.4s, maybe he overtakes Hampton. And now I just think they've separated, right? And now we're having conversations about Johnson versus Judkins or Johnson versus Travion Henderson. You still see plenty of running backs in the NFL that run in the 4.6s that have had success. I think of Josh Jacobs, who I believe ran a 4.66, and he led the NFL in rushing yards in 2022. It was awesome this year. So it's not a death knell by any stretch. But when you're looking at this running back class and you're trying to break ties, a guy running a 4.48 like Judkins compared to a 4.58 like Caleb Johnson, I think it makes it hard to get in on where he's being drafted right now.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And again, I think that's the key word is maybe tiebreakers, is using some of these performances to confirm the things that you've seen on the field. I don't think I learned a whole lot from Caleb Johnson's testing necessarily, because I think kind of matches what you see on the field, right? Like that's not athleticism isn't the way that he wins. So
no.
Do I think it should be as big of a knock for him? No. I think there are probably going to be some people that overreact to this time a little bit more than I think you should. But there's no doubt that like mentally, when you're checking the boxes, he's going to be a tiebreaker in the negative way. Another Johnson that I think probably was like the overall biggest loser in terms of his potential dynasty value. Tez Johnson came in, just under 5'10", 154 pounds. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm pretty sure that's the third lightest wide receiver we've seen at the combine dating back to 2003. And like the other, case files here, not great, right? Like we had Tutu Atwell in 2021, somehow drafted in round 2. No idea how. Never scored more than 93 half PPR points in a single season. Tutu Atwell, just over 1,300 career receiving yards and 4 touchdowns on his rookie contract. That is negligible. Then we have Brandon Banks, Kansas State, 2010, went undrafted, had a stunning career stat line of 11 catches for 35 receiving yards over the course of his career. Tez Johnson, the numbers, I think on their own, not great, coming in that light, but it's the testing that really, really does it. Because man, if you're going to be that light and that, you got to be quick, right? Did not showcase that quickness. And I think this is going to be probably something that entirely breaks the draft stock of Tez Johnson here. 4.51 40-yard dash at 154 pounds. That's awful.
Maybe I'm coping here a little bit because I like Tez Johnson, but like Tank Dell ran a 4.49 at 165. It's not all that different. Now, what's awesome about Tez is that
10 pounds heavier and it's still faster.
I know. The 3-cone drill, 6.65 3-cone is incredible. I mean, you are flying through that 3-cone. And the jumps were good. 37-inch vertical, 10-11 broad jump. It's just I think he's incredibly quick. But I don't know if he's like at the most long speed. Like but then again, I saw the gauntlet drill and he had the highest miles per hour in the gauntlet drill. Like it's just a really weird profile. But you are right. He is a combine loser because I think there was a chance with a 4.30, 40-yard dash, 4.35. We're talking about him as a top 100 pick. And now I think because of that profile, because you're under 155 pounds and you're not overly fast, Kate, I won't be surprised if he's somebody that goes day 3, 4th, 5th, 6th round, because just a lot of teams are going to cross him off the board. I like Tez, but this was a killer for his dynasty stock.
Yeah. And I mean, you mentioned the comparison to, Tank Dell, for instance. And I think it's a really great comp, not just because they're really tiny players, but I think because they win in similar ways with the crispness of the route running, right? They can shake off a defender with ease. Like there were times where you watch Tez Johnson, you watch Tank Dell, and because of the quickness and, their change of direction, which is reflected in his 3-cone, like because of that, they're able to shake off a defender like completely out of camera view. So I think that's still something like that still rings true to his game, perfectly matches what you see on tape in terms of the way he wins. But it's still something that I think like there are going to be plenty of teams in the pre-draft process that just say like,
No
what
thanks.
are we going to get out of this tiny guy? Right. And I don't necessarily think it's going to be like Tank Dell, recency bias. Obviously, he's had some catastrophic injuries,
Yeah.
but coming off of back-to-back season-ending injuries, you have to wonder, does
I,
his size play into that at all? And that's a knock too. I don't
I
know.
love Tez Johnson's tape, but at this point I would be shocked if he goes top 100. And we just unfortunately we just don't see many hits in our fantasy leagues, dynasty leagues where receivers are being drafted outside the top 100, especially with profiles like this. So it's rough. Just say a little prayer for me at night. All right, okay, let's talk about some sleepers that stood out to us over the weekend. We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft Show with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the NFL season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL Draft on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. All right, Kay, let's talk about some sleepers that stood out to us over the weekend. Who do you got?
I want to start off by talking about tight end Terrence Ferguson out of Oregon, who tested as one of the most athletic tight ends here at the combine. Now, little asterisk maybe because we had a number of tight ends in this class not participate in the on-field drills, so they're not going to factor into these equations. But a player that has a fairly consistent profile in terms of production year over year coming out of Oregon. Never had a monstrous 1,000-yard season, but what do we look at when we're trying to identify some of these sleeper tight ends? I think we want that athleticism. We want, the we want to know you at least did a little something in college, and
Yep.
he checks both of those boxes in a big way. But when you look like historically at, the combine over like the last 5 years, most of the players that have posted a similar athletic profile, in addition to the type of production profile, but a lot of these players have gone round 2, round 3. I think he solidified himself as a day 2 pick. 4.63 40-yard dash, 10 foot 2-inch broad jump, 39-inch vert. Um, 6'5", 247 pounds. I think he checked a lot of boxes. The on-field drills were really solid. I think this is a guy that solidified himself probably as like a 3rd round pick. And this is a pretty solid tight end class. So I think that's saying something.
Yeah, I've got quite a few. Do you want me just to run through a couple of
Let's
them?
do it.
All right.
Rapid style.
Let's start running back. Brashard Smith is somebody that I've liked for a while coming out of SMU. Now, he was a receiver at Miami who was very productive, made the move to running back at SMU, had 1,600 yards and 18 touchdowns this year, goes to the NFL Combine, 5'10", 195. That's on the smaller side, Kate, but it's not tiny either. Runs a 4.39 40-yard dash. I mean, just absolutely flying. This is the type of profile that we love from like a fantasy perspective, a fast running back with great receiving ability. He's going to be on the field early during his rookie year. Think Tyrone Tracy last year, who made that move from wide receiver to running back. I like Brashard Smith quite a bit. And then let's get to some receivers. Let's talk about somebody that I think has a chance to go top 60. Jalen Knoll, not Noel, Knoll. Just lit it up at 5'10", 194 pounds, 4.39 40-yard dash at a 41.5-inch vertical, 11.2 broad jump, 6.82 in the 3-cone. And then, oh yeah, by the way, 23 reps at the bench press. I was tweeting out some videos this morning, Kate. I'm not saying he's this player, but you get some Lad McConkey vibes by watching Knoll. And you turn on that Senior Bowl tape, and man, those guys cannot cover him at all. I think he's fascinating. And then one last one, and then I'll shut up. Dante Thornton, who is somebody that I like pre-combine. I don't know if a lot of people know him. Didn't go to the Senior Bowl. Was at the Shrine Game. We talk about Matthew Golden running a 4.29 at 5'10". Dante Thornton ran a 4.30 at 6'5", 206 pounds.
You're not supposed to move like that at that
No,
size.
and in fact, he's the only receiver in NFL Combine history to run a sub 4.35 at 6'4" or taller. I mean, he is a unicorn. He averaged, get this, he averaged 21.2 yards after the catch per reception this year at Tennessee. I think he's a day 3 pick, but if in your 3rd, 4th round of your rookie drafts, this is the type of guy that I want to gamble on.
I think that's fair. I still have like Tennessee flashbacks. I might be a little
You should.
scarred from Tennessee wide receivers, but the profile is there, right?
But we're also not spending a top 75 pick on like Jalen Hyatt or Cedric Tillman. Like this is a guy that's probably going to go on day 3 because of the lack of production, but you're taking a rare athlete.
Yeah, I think that's probably the kicker there is what's it going to cost you? And if the cost is more minimal, then it gets a lot easier to get on board as opposed to like, one of these, Jalen Hyatt, Cedric Tillman, probably not a great example of that, but
No.
I think it becomes a lot more palatable on the other side of things here.
Just a couple other guys that I'd like to mention really quick. Kyle Williams, a wide receiver from Washington State, put up massive numbers over the last couple of years there. He ran a 4.40, which I thought was a great time for him. He's another guy that's probably going to go on day 3 that I think can help you right away. Savion Williams ran a 4.48. I know there were some people maybe expecting faster. That's still a great time for somebody as big as he is. I think that one was interesting as well.
6'3", 222 pounds, ran a 4.48.
I think we're talking about Caleb Johnson running a 4.58 at 221.
Yeah.
I know. So I'm not the biggest Savion Williams fan, but how can you not be impressed by those numbers?
I think you have to be. Any other sleepers that you want to talk about that maybe you're going to probably develop an unhealthy draft crush on here in the coming weeks?
I don't quite know what to do with Tyler Shuck, the quarterback from Louisville. He ran a 4.63 40-yard dash, which is incredible for a guy of his old age at 26. I'm surprised that oil up the knees.
Just say no to 26-year-old quarterbacks.
I know. Part of me, though, when I was watching the combine, like he was getting the crowd hyped. Like he was you could tell he was so excited to be there. And I do wonder, like, is there a chance that he could sneak into like middle day 2 of the NFL draft? And then in your super flex leagues, like quarterbacks that get drafted inside the top 50, we get excited about it, especially ones that are going to be 26, because you would expect that guy to get on the field fairly quickly. I'm not saying that you should draft him high, but Tyler Shuck is at least somebody who is on my radar a little bit now after a strong combine.
Fair. I still have my question marks here.
I know, and you should.
Yeah. I think it's fair to get excited about the combine. And, generally speaking, we didn't get, most NFL quarterbacks or most quarterbacks were expecting to get some decent draft stock. We didn't get to see participate in these testing drills. Testing drills generally not going to be as big a factor for the quarterback position as maybe they are, wide receiver. But yeah, we didn't get a ton of information. So when we do get a little glimpse of a quarterback that's bigger and tested as well as he did, that's pretty darn intriguing. Yeah.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. Check out the channel on YouTube. We post videos every single day over there. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosier, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.